He's dumb, he's forgetful, and most importantly, he's slow. It's time to cover the rise and fall of Slowbro in GSCUU. While Slowbro is incredibly slow, everything else about it is incredibly solid. Slowbro is one of the best tanks in the entire metagame, being incredibly bulky on the physical side and powerful offensively. Its typing is both solid offensively and defensively, granting Slowbro many useful resistances and a stab combination that few Pokemon resist. Slowbro resists both Water and Psychic, which are some of the most common attacking types in the metagame. Slowbro was able to 1v1 a ridiculous amount of Pokemon in GSCUU, ranging from top tier threats like Granbull and Piloswine, all the way to niche threats like Arcanine and Gligar. Slowbro is a solid check to many of the tier's physical attackers like Granbull, Piloswine and Dodrio. Checking Granbull is particularly notable due to how limited counterplay to the bull is. Slowbro is not 2 KO'd by a +1 frustration, and it guaranteed 3 KOs Granbull in return with both Surf and Psychic. Granbull is the only Pokemon in the entire metagame who can check both Piloswine and Granbull at the same time, which is immensely useful considering how limited both are in counterplay. Most physical attackers need to boost in order to break through Slowbro, and they aren't good at setting up on Slowbro due to its strengths. Slowbro is one of the most powerful special attackers in GSCUU, possessing a very respectable special attack stat of 100, as well as an excellent stab combination. Surf and Psychic complement each other very well, and hit Pokemon like Nidoqueen, Quillfish, Haunter, Piloswine, and Sandslash for super effective damage. Even if an opposing Pokemon isn't weak to Psychic or Surf, Slowbro's strength means it 3 KOs most neutral targets, which includes Pokemon like Granbull, Scyther, Pinsir, and Omastar. Psychic also has a 10% chance to lower an opponent's special defense, and Slowbro can fish for this special defense drop against a Pokemon as stalemates, like Hypno, to potentially break through it. Slowbro is also decent against mixed attackers, like Nidoqueen and Arcanine, switching in and threatening them with its attacks. Slowbro is a very difficult Pokemon to consistently switch into without using a dedicated special wall, like Hypno, Chansey, or Lantern. While Pokemon such as Electabuzz can immediately threaten Slowbro, they take a large chunk of damage when switching in, so they are not long-term answers. Slowbro is a fantastic rest talk user, as this allows it to maintain longevity or remaining offensively potent. Slowbro is able to absorb status moves such as Lovely Kiss from Nidoqueen and Granbull, or Thunder Wave from Hypno or opposing Slowbro. Yes, while Surf and Psychic are the most common moves on Rest Talk Slowbro, it can drop one of its stab moves, usually Psychic, for Thunder Wave. Thunder Wave allows Slowbro to cripple most offensive Pokemon, such as Mr. Mime, Scyther, and Pinsir. Thunder Wave Slowbro is very solid support for slower setup sweepers, such as Cursed Hidden Power Granbull and Pinsir. Using Thunder Wave does mean Slowbro has to give up coverage, however, and it also makes it less reliable against Pokemon like Nidoqueen and Granbull when rest talking. When Slowbro is using Sleep Talk against Nidoqueen, it has a chance to pull the useless Thunder Wave, whereas with Psychic and Surf, it would have a guaranteed good Sleep Talk pull against them. This can make Slowbro less reliable against the threats that it needs to handle. Slowbro could be used on all sorts of teams, but it was primarily a staple on offensive teams, providing invaluable defensive utility while being offensively potent itself. Stall teams also used it commonly, since Slowbro could check so much on the physical side. Slowbro was actually not originally in GSC underuse, it was trapped in BL for some time because some people thought it was decent in GSCOU 20 years ago or something, I don't know. Anyway, around 2010 though, Slowbro dropped to GSC underused, around the same time that Kingdra was unleashed onto the metagame. Now, unlike Kingdra, Slowbro didn't end up ruining the entire tier and getting banned, but it did establish itself as a top tier Pokemon early on. Throughout the early 2010s, Slowbro was widely considered the best Pokemon in GSC underused after Nidoqueen, since it was so consistent and splashable. Some people even wanted to ban Slowbro at some point, citing it as too bulky, strong, and for having an overall negative effect on the metagame. A large criticism of GSC underused used to be that Slowbro, and to a lesser extent Slowking and Hypno, would constantly get into people-style wars with each other, bringing the game to a screeching halt and making games boring to play and spectate. A lot of people thought of GSC Underuse as it's the Rest Talk Psychic PP style piss war. That was largely over exaggerated though, and it mostly came from poor team building, poor playing, or both. As time went on, this complaint slowly disappeared, not just because people realised it wasn't true, but because Slowbro itself started to go way down in usage. So what went wrong for Slowbro? I spent the last few minutes ranting like a mad person about how good it is. So why'd it go from a top 3 Pokemon to just a good Pokemon? The primary reason for Slowbro's decline was that GSC Underuse just got more refined as time went on, and people realised that Slowbro wasn't as good as it was previously thought to be. It's kinda similar to Rapidash and GSC NU, who sharply declined in usage as the tier went in a direction that wasn't favourable to it, and because there were better options. Firstly, offensive teams went in a direction that did not benefit Slowbro, as they began to use Pokemon like Mr. Mime, Gyarados, and Lantern way more than they used to. Rest Talk Mr. Mime is one of the tier's most dangerous special attackers, and Slowbro has a rather poor matchup against it, not dealing too much with Surf and being blasted by Thunder. Most offensive teams hate switching into Mr. Mime, and Slowbro provided mostly free entry for it. Thus, Slowbro offenses needed to pair Slowbro with Hypno, which greatly restricted team building. It was a similar story with Lantern, who Slowbro also provided free entry for, and was also a big threat to offensive teams. Slowbro's weakness to Electric meant that Pokemon like Haunter and Nidoqueen could reliably threaten it, and that it was forced out by Electric types like Lantern and Ampharos. Players also began to favour other Water and Psychic types over Slowbro. Blastoise and Gyarados both had numerous advantages over it, such as rapid spin and greater speed for the former, and a better move pool and ground immunity for the latter. Blastoise took over Slowbro's spot on defensive teams, and Gyarados then became the premier water type for offensive teams. Slowbro's largest issue, however, turned out to be its main trait as a Pokemon. It's slow as shit. Slowbro is outsped by every single Pokemon in GSC Underused, except for Slowking, with speed ties with. This is a big problem because it means Slowbro always goes last, and as a result always takes damage from the opponent before it can retaliate. If Slowbro wants to switch into something like Granbull or Piloswine, then it must tank an attack on the switch and then a subsequent attack. This greatly limits Slowbro's ability to function as a tank. It also makes it vulnerable to crits, since it's always going last means there are more chances to fish for crits against it. Slowbro was also vulnerable to spikes, which compounds the previous issue even further, since it's always taking spikes damage in addition to those attacks. Spikes just make it easier for your average Pokemon to break through Slowbro. For example, Nidoqueen has a chance to 2-KO Slowbro with Thunder if Slowbro has taken 1 tick of spikes damage, when without spikes, Nidoqueen could never 2-KO Slowbro. While Slowbro seems super unkillable at first, it really isn't when you factor in its electric weakness, abysmal speed, and vulnerability to spikes. Slowbro isn't a bad Pokemon in GSC Underused, but these days, it's a pretty mixed bag of a Pokemon. It can check a lot, but it also lets in dangerous Pokemon like Mr. Mime, faces immense competition with other water types, and has issues with spikes and its low speed. It still is a pretty nice Pokemon, and it can be fairly annoying, but it's a shadow of its former self.